The town hall was located at the east end of Cassidy Park across from the depot. The bottom was used to house the ladder wagon, the hose cart, and the pumper. Two people stood on each side of the pumper and moved the long handle up and down. The horses were kept elsewhere. The fire department was organized around 1886 to 1889. It was reorganized in 1898. There were two 200-gallon cisterns on Main Street. One still remains behind the store. When Valley Springs took delivery of the 1937 Ford truck, there was a fire within 1 hour. The check was not even signed for the truck yet. The truck is the one that we use in the parades today. Valley Springs has always had a number 1 fire department, and today has a top-of-the-line EMT squad to match. Neil Scadden served as the chief for almost 30 years, and today Don Johnson serves that post. On the second floor there was a large opera hall used for social gatherings and organizations, plays, melodramas, and the like. Other forms of entertainment were chautauquas, medicine shows, ball games, shooting matches, and bands. This is a picture of the Phoenix Band, formed in 1889, taken beside the town hall. Later, many members of the Valley Springs joined the Beaver Creek Band, and concerts were held in the band shell. I have been told of people throwing money to the band and the money falling through the floor. Around 1912, a screen was hung on the side of a boxcar and silent movies were held with glass slides showing the advertisements. In 1916, Gus Running had a movie theater called the Alco. This was about a half block west of the corner bar. This photo shows the bandstand near the elevator in the depot. Valley Springs had good livery stables. This photo is an early stable at an unknown location. This livery was south of the Legion Hall. The building to the right was the Valley Springs Power Plant, and later the early Legion Hall. This livery was moved to the present Jim Schaefer farm, and only the right half of it now remains. Note the lightning rods in the building. The man with the white team is Elmer Schaefer. Elmer had a dray line service in Valley Springs. The other teams were mules. This is a picture of Elmer Schaefer in his delivery wagon in front of the present Larry Johnson house. This picture was taken where the bank is now. Will Brill had a livery wagon there that featured Hambletonian horses along with other buggies and wagons. He sold the billet business to Will Ross, pictured here, and on Thanksgiving Eve in 1905 the livery burned. 32 heads of horses, buggies, and harnesses were lost. Note the fly nets in the horses. The roller mill is in the distant left. 3 of the early doctors in Valley Springs were Dr. Brill, who had an office south of the cafe building, Dr. Bissell, and Dr. Harvey, pictured here. They served day and night by buggy. Dr. Harvey preferred the back of a mule. An early photo of the east end of town. From the left was a blacksmith shop, bank, the cafe that was later Pottinger Doug, Skillman's store, Gutterman's store, barber shop, legal drug that was later the Elko Theater, an unknown building, meat market, and hardware. There are 2 churches, the Baptist to the left and the Methodist to the right, the school and 2 matching railroad houses. The roof of an ice house is in the middle of the picture. This is a picture of ice cutting looking from the bridge north of the school towards the present Ellen Cruz place. It was stored in ice houses in town and covered with sawdust. They used ice saws, logger-type bars, and tongs and horses. This picture is of the bank building in later years, but in September of 1903 it was the site of the Valley Springs robbery. 3 men were at the safe and 3 or more were outside. The explosion woke the town people. Dr. Bliss and Clark Hetland fired at the robbers from across the street in the stockyards. Mr. Skillman came with a lantern and had a revolver shoved in his face, only to be locked up in a boxcar. The robbery got the robbers about $630, but they dropped $70 in silver dollars and did about $900 damage to the bank and the safe. They escaped west on a railroad handcar to horses that they had tied out by Beaver Valley Church. This is the inside of the bank. To the right is the fraternal hall. Built in 1904, it was a social center of Valley Springs. There were dances, parties, school programs, as well as 6 lodges using the facility. The bottom was used as a general store. There were barber shops along Main Street. This one features a single wooden chair and a small parlor stove for heat. Note the 2 kerosene lights with the reflectors on the wall. And note the large coffee pot with a spigot on the stove for hot water. This is the barber shop of Frank and Bernie Howe. Their dad, Perry Howe, was one of the first settlers and an early surveyor of Valley Springs. This features 3 chairs and a large hanging light. Bernie Howe went on to Deadwood to barber and had Poker Ellis among his clientele. This is a picture of the Perry Howe family. They were very good musicians, playing in the Beaver Creek Band, and they left with the Kickapoo Sago Medicine Show to perform for a very short period of time. Look at this picture very closely. I call it my ghost picture. You can see right through Mr. Howe. This picture has a gas light on the ceiling. This is a picture of the Bazell Brothers Photography Shop. They took most of the pictures in this collection. In the early photographs, you had to sit perfectly still for a short period of time, and I believe in the ghost picture, Perry Howe got up and left to form that ghost image. This picture shows one of the brothers with a camera on a tripod on the farm 1 mile north of town. There was a good wood supply and the privy in the trees. Being photographers, the brothers had a chance to take pictures of the horrible bicycle wreck in the early 1900s. John Bazell was a state shooting champion. He's shown here on the left beside the buggy. John was blind in one eye, making his shot feats even greater. Many shooting events were held at the farm, and Ivan Else tells of releasing live pigeons from a pit as a boy for the events. I do not have any photos of the air dome. This shows a piece of stock. It was a large building that had the sides that opened up to let the air flow through. It was used for meetings, chautauquas, and so on. The first school in Minnehaha County was built in Valley Springs in 1874. The first teacher was Miss Ida Schaefer. This is a picture taken in 1909 of a later school. This school sits where the Reformed Church is, and the church utilized some of the building when they bought it. This is a picture of the 1913 school kids. Shoes were an option. The present Reformed Church was converted from the school buildings and was dedicated June 12, 1930. The Congregational Church was organized in 1878. Services were held in the homes until the building was built in 1884 at a cost of $2,000. It was the first church building in Valley Springs and the 9th in Dakota Territory. 4 people went by wagon to Sioux Falls to buy an organ. On the return trip, going up the bank of the river, the organ slid out and into the river. The organ was quickly rescued and set up on the bank. Mrs. Howe promptly sat down and played Praise God from Who All Blessings Flow as the water ran out the bottom of the organ. Grace Bible Church. After a few years of study, a federation was made between the Congregational Church and the Baptist Church in 1906. They combined the Sunday schools and separate services were held. The union was made complete in 1913 and called the Federated Church. A couple of years later, a basement and a kitchen were added to the church. In 1961, the Federated Church became a member of the United Church of Christ. The church became known as Grace Bible Church in 2002. The First Lutheran Church was organized in 1911. They rented the First Baptist Church for $10 a month and purchased that building in 1921. They joined the Palisades Lutheran Church to form a parish in 1956. The first services were held in the present building on Easter Sunday, 1957. On April 30th, 1908, a tornado demolished the Methodist Church. It also demolished the Eli Harris blacksmith shop, did much damage to the whole east side of Valley Springs. The Valley Springs Vidette paper said the damages could total fully $15,000. Note in this picture the pulpit's still standing. There were 2 large sheep ranches near Valley, the Swancut and the Keeney Sheep Ranch. This shows a picture of some boys shearing wool from the sheep, one turning the crank and the other running the shears. Here are a few pictures of early farm life near Valley Springs. This is a sulky plow and a horse-drawn spreader. This is taken on the Bazell place. There are 5 horses on the plow, while one of them is white. It was good to have a well-matched team. This is a steam rig and water tender beside a water tank. Note the framework made from the branches in the background. This was built and straw from the thresher blown over the top of it to form a winter shelter for animals. Here's a steam threshing rig in action. There's a bicycle leaning against a pile of shocks. Two men are working at the shock pile to the left while the two men on the right are unloading shocks. Then they would switch. Most steam engines had a cover on the smokestack called a spark arrestor to prevent sparks from causing a fire. This is a picture showing a horsepower. The horses walked in a circle and turned gears that in turn turned a power takeoff type tumbling rod and ran the elevator in this case. The front of the wagon here is raised by a wagon hoist by hand. It looks like a cob pile in the background. Many horses on a large horsepower could run a threshing rig. The tumbling rod was usually covered for the horses to walk over. Laying in a winter wood supply with a buzz saw ran from an engine. This was in the days before OSHA. This is a right-handed McCormick binder. This binder has 3 horses. The binder was used to make shocks, which they were then stood upright. This picture shows a gas engine belt driving a corn sheller. Elijah Bazell is in the wagon. It looks as though they had a very good crop. There's a water tower in the rear. This photo shows a band playing in front of the fraternal hall with many autos. Note the dusters on the guys to the right. This picture shows Andrew Swanson by his gas station at the stop sign just north of Valley. It sat on the west side. Note the signs on the building. Across the street from the Swanson station to the north was the Hanson station. This was later called the Kronk station. Here there was also a small cafe.